I watched all of the Final Destination movies for the very first time recently, and going into this franchise, I didn't really know anything about it. I knew that some people get unalived in mysterious, horrific ways that are scarring, and that's really all I knew. Turns out that's basically exactly what this series is. There's not much else to it, and all of these movies feel very samey after a point. But that doesn't mean we still can't talk about them. So welcome to Bite Size Bunny. My name's Tony, and today we are going to be ranking all of the Final Destination movies. So without much further ado, let's get to it. The third installment in this series almost feels like a parody of itself. Most of the characters in this movie are irritating, they almost come off cartoony at times. The direction also just feels really off here, making some of the performances feel campy. The premonition sequence should be way more terrifying than it actually is. The idea of a roller coaster failing and going off the rails is already terrifying as is, but the way they approach it is so over the top that it comes off comical. Some of the effects are a little rough too, which really doesn't help its case. And as far as the effects go, it's not just the opening sequence. Some of the more CGI heavy kills feel like you're watching a video game. Not a bad looking video game, but still a video game, so it loses a lot of the weight and impact of some of these characters' unfortunate fates. And once again, this movie rehashes the same exact story as its previous two installments, and at this point in my binge, it was definitely getting tiring. Does it help that this is one of the more forgettable ones in the series as well? Oh boy, this movie looks like it came straight off the Sci-Fi Channel, and then I realized, oh, it's because it was filmed in 3D. That's why it looks so ugly. In the fourth installment of the Final Destination series, most of the cast doesn't really serve much of a purpose outside of getting to be blood-filled water balloons that are going to pop in various ways. Though I will say there are a few enjoyable characters here. Like the main couple here, they're charming enough that you're rooting for them to figure out a way to escape death's call. Even though 4 movies in, we know exactly how this is all going to pan out. And then I also want to give props to George. This is one of the only characters out of the entire series where they actually seem to make an attempt at giving him a more involved backstory. It's not complex by any means, but there's more substance in this one character than in most of the faces we meet throughout this series of films. If only they could have put the bare minimum amount of effort into the rest of the characters. With Final Destination 5, it at least seems like they made an attempt to return to form with this one. While the various ways the characters are disposed of is over the top, the film does seem to try and go back to playing it straight instead of making the concept feel goofy. The direction in the 5th movie definitely seems like a step up from the last 2 installments. It's still not amazing, but you can tell there was a genuine effort here to make this feel more tonally in sync with the first 2 Final Destinations. But Final Destination 5 doesn't make any attempts to break out of its extremely formulaic structure. The story unfolds in the exact same way as it did the last 4 times, beat for beat, and at this point in the franchise, I was so relieved I didn't have any more of these movies to watch. At least until the 6th one releases in just a few months. I will say though, I did appreciate the fact that they tried to mix it up a little bit with its ending. It ends in a way that I was totally content with, and I was kind of relieved they tried to do something a bit more clever than what I had gotten used to with the finales of the previous films. I just want to start out with saying, when I saw that Tony Todd was in this movie, I was so excited. I couldn't be more thrilled. Seeing Tony Todd is always such a treat, and I wish we got more of them in this universe. I really liked the fact that this movie plays its concept straight. It is a genuine horror movie, and it presents itself that way. It doesn't come off slapsticky like some of the other movies do. Yes, the characters make some really stupid decisions throughout the story that don't always make sense, but when they do start getting unalived, it makes for some really intense sequences with some solid tension building. Those sequences are well done, and in a messed up way, they're fascinating to watch unfold. Carter has got to be one of the most insufferable douchebags in this entire series. right out the gate, I found myself strongly disliking this character. There is a little bit of a redemption by the end of the film, but oh my lord, he was rough to deal with. At times, I feel for Alex, like talk about a horrible, terrifying position to be put in. But then he goes and makes a string of decisions that are just so stupid you want to reach through the screen and shake him. And I was pleasantly surprised to see Seann William Scott here. My introduction to him as a kid was in movies like Goon, Evolution, and The Rundown, and I always thought he was one of the bigger highlights of those movies. In here, he plays a character named Billy, who's a smaller role, but he's definitely one of the better characters in the movie. And at number 1, I've got Final Destination 2, which I think is one of those rare horror sequels where it's actually better than the first movie. The cast of characters this time around is way better. The first movie has a cast that's extremely tropey and not always in the most enjoyable ways. Final Destination 2, on the other hand, has way more likable characters. The premonition scene that kicks off the chain of events this time around is definitely bigger in scale, but it's significantly more intense and terrifying. As someone that hadn't seen this film before, I already hated driving behind cars on the highway that carried things. But yeah, this movie definitely cements that fear into your brain. Talk about having an opening sequence that's effective. The various deadly coincidences are somewhat better this time around too. Some of the effects don't always look the best, but if you're someone looking for these things to be more complex and jacked up, this movie definitely delivers, even if it started to teeter on being downright silly at times. The biggest issue I have with Final Destination 2 is while I do think it is a much better movie than the first installment, it does retread a lot of the same grounds, so it starts to feel repetitive pretty early on. And the ending of this movie is so corny. I could have done without that one. But there is my ranking of all of the Final Destination movies after watching them back to back for the very first time. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Like, subscribe, and all that YouTube stuff. And what's your favorite Final Destination movie? I'd love to know.